Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. It is Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025. I'm Nate Eaton. So glad you're here. As you can see, I don't have hotel room curtains behind me. I'm in our little studio here in Idaho Falls, and it's good to be back. It's good to be back where it's not 115 degrees, where it's nice and cool. And I've been playing croquet with my family every night on the back lawn. Anyway, good to be with you tonight. And we have a couple things that we're going to talk about, including the latest on the Bryan Kohberger case. Is the trial still going to happen next month? Well, jury selection next month. Hearing was held. We'll talk about that. Also, a case that I've talked about briefly over the years, but new developments, which were announced just yesterday. I was at the news conference with the sheriff, Ron Ball, when they talked about these. We'll talk about that. And my interview with DJ Barney. Who's that, you're saying? Well, he is the owner of the storage unit, We Are Self-Storage, in Rexburg, Idaho, that held all of Lori's belongings. Not all of her belongings, I should say the belongings she left when she fled quickly with Chad to Hawaii, Chad Daybell. For the first time, DJ is sitting down to talk about how this whole thing has affected him, about what he remembers meeting Lori, about her bringing in those items, the security cameras that had just been installed, and how he even had to change his name, likely because of all of the coverage. So we'll talk about all of that tonight here on Courtroom Insider. Why don't we kick it off with the new developments in the case of Ralph and Karen Bryan. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the story, let me give you a brief recap. A couple is asleep in their home in Rexburg in 2021 when they're awakened in the middle of the night, and a man is there and he steals a gun from the home, and then he uses that gun and kills Ralph Bryan, and then he uses a knife and stabs Ralph's wife multiple times. The suspect takes off and is apprehended the next day, and he's 18. Pierre Lake is his name. He confesses to the police during the interview that he did the murder and that he attacked Karen, but that's all he would say. He wouldn't talk about any other person involved, if there were other people involved, and it quickly, not quickly, but relatively quickly, compared to if it went to trial, it was resolved. He pleaded guilty, and he was sentenced 30 years to life in prison. The kid is only 21 now. I mean, he's young. It was just a shocking story and bizarre in a way that this would happen to this couple who did not know Pierre Lake, and the fact that he would come to their home in the middle of the night and kill them. Try to kill them and succeed in killing the one. Mr. Bryan, well, we learned new information yesterday. Sheriff Ron Ball, who at the time this happened was a detective with the Rexburg Police Department, also one of the lead investigators on the Daybell case, he held a news conference yesterday and announced some new charges. Here's what he said.
On Friday, June 13th, 2025, a Madison County grand jury indicted Ryler Jensen, 28 years of age, and Anthony Dean Wilson, 33 years of age, on charges of conspiracy to murder in the first degree and murder in the first degree in connection with a 2021 homicide of Ralph Bryan. The court has set for both individuals who have been served their indictments at $1 million each. This was a night intrusion into the Bryan residence, which concluded in Ralph Bryan being shot and eventually succumbing to his injuries, and Karen Bryan having been stabbed several times. She was treated at the hospital and later released, but her husband, Ralph Bryan, passed away due to his injuries.
So you've now got Pierre Lake, who is in prison, at least for 30 years, and now you've got these two other guys, Wilson and Jensen. Here is the interesting things that we learned from the indictment, is that Wilson, according to the indictment, instructed Pierre Lake, to kill a person in a home, but apparently he may have gone to the wrong house. The person that he was instructed to kill lived somewhere else. That's how we read the indictment. The name of the person is redacted, so we don't know who it is in the indictment. But Wilson instructed Lake to kill the person between September 1st and September 20th in 2021. Wilson put a, quote, hit out on the person during that time period, and Jensen and Lake both conducted surveillance of a home in Madison County. We don't know which home. Lake drove to or, quote, near the home on September 21st and, quote, entered a mobile home, believing it belonging to so-and-so. So he then went in and committed the crime. Now, what was it? The wrong home? Was it the wrong person? Did they think the person lived in the wrong home? Those are all questions that will come out at trial. These guys, though, that were just announced yesterday, both of them are currently already in local jails. Anthony Dean, or TJ Wilson, he's charged with conspiring to kill a judge and a sheriff. And we reported on this months ago, my colleague Kaylin Hart. You can read her stuff. The other guy, Ryler Jensen, we've reported on for drug crimes, grand theft, things like that. So these guys now are charged with conspiring to commit the murders of Ralph and Karen Bryan. The conspiracy charges with the murders of the attempted murder of the judge versus this couple, those are not connected, we're told. Sheriff Ball said he didn't think that they were connected. But man, what a change of events. I just can't imagine being in your house, sleeping, and a stranger comes in and kills your spouse and then stabs you multiple times, and then you're left. And just such a horrific crime. I actually sat down last year with Karen Bryan. She brought in a lot of members of her family. We did an interview in our other studio, and such a wonderful family. And they've really, this has been so challenging for them to have to go through this. But now with these additional charges, the sheriff says that it's possible there could be more co-conspirators out there, but anyone with information is asked to contact the sheriff's office. So I'll stay on top of that one, let you know what happens there. Now let's move on to Bryan Kohberger, just weeks away from his scheduled trial, and a hearing was held also yesterday. His attorneys are asking the judge to push back the trial. They're saying that they don't have enough time to go through all the discovery, that Dateline affected the case in a major way when they aired a special a few weeks ago and revealed new information that had not been reported before, and that they need more time. So they argued that case yesterday in front of Judge Hippler. Here's a little bit of what his attorney, Ann Taylor, said.
We have talked about the discovery issues in this courtroom before, and that in large part brings us to need a continuance. 68 terabytes of information is a huge amount of information. There have been 23 requests for additional discovery over the span of 2.5 years and 7 motions to compel. When I say that this doesn't come as a surprise, that this comes from the record, I would direct the court to look back to May of 2023 and June of 2023 and our second motion to compel. Included in that was what was known as Exhibit A from the defense, and that depicted how we were receiving discovery. So this is not a new issue. This is something that's been coming up for a long time. We were receiving discovery, but it was such that you would get a file that would say hundreds of photographs, hundreds of pages of reports, each having to be looked at individually to know what was there and then organized. This case has also faced unique issues, starting with the media coverage of this high-profile case, non-dissemination orders that were addressed in courts, and then the grand jury materials that we had to fight to get access to before we could properly challenge the grand jury indictment.
So that's Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's attorney. The prosecution said, no, we're ready to go. We can't keep pushing it off. They're ready to get this trial underway. The crimes happened years ago, and they're ready to get this taken care of.
We have not seen specifics. I did not hear any specifics from counsel just now about these witnesses need to be contacted, these records need to be obtained. And then the court, I think, mentioned at prior hearing we had when this was motion to continue was first raised, that the court would be looking at what admissible evidence the defense needs to obtain and what strategies would actually be used to fruitfully obtain that evidence. And we don't have anything specific that we can respond to about that. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, Your Honor, but I think the record that we do have shows that the court can use its discretion to deny this motion to continue. With respect to the media coverage, we acknowledge, as the court has, that will pose challenges for jury selection. The issue, though, is not whether there is a lot of publicity. We know there's going to be a lot of publicity regardless of when this trial happens. As Ms. Taylor said, people will continue to talk about this case. The issue is whether the court, using the procedures it has established, or maybe even modifying them as the court wants to, can seat a panel of impartial jurors. The Supreme Court of Idaho has found that despite widespread publicity, even on the day of jury selection, that is possible. That is possible in this case, despite the challenges.
So the defense wants it pushed off. The prosecutor says, no, let's go. The judge didn't officially issue a decision right away, but here's how he ended the open hearing yesterday.
All right, I'll take the matter under advisement and get an opinion out in short order. In the meantime, I fully encourage everyone to continue as if the trial is going to take place when it is scheduled for. Again, I reserve the right to write the decision that I come to, but as of now, I would tell you that it's likely you're going to trial on the date indicated.
So it sounds like this thing's going to happen. Jury selection is set to begin end of July, or I believe August 3rd. Let me look at my calendar here. August 4th, excuse me. Jury selection is set to begin publicly on August 4th. It's likely potential jurors will receive questionnaires beforehand and that they will go down to the courthouse, or that the prosecution, the defense, and the judge will go through those questionnaires the week before, like how they did in Daybell, and then filter out the people that they don't think can serve and then bring down the people they think can. Jury selection is scheduled for the week of August 4th, and then the following week on the 11th is when opening statements are scheduled to begin. So I will be there for the trial, and we will be streaming it on eastidahonews.com. You can follow all of the developments there. After the open hearing yesterday, they went into a closed hearing on the alternate perpetrator legal defense. If you're not following this case and you want to be up to date, the Idaho Statesmen, our partners there, have been doing a great job. Alex Brzee and Kevin Fixler have been on it since day one. They're going to be there for the trial. They've done some great stuff. What has happened, what his attorneys are saying, is that they've come across a tip in their review of the discovery, and they've submitted proof of a person or persons as the real culprit rather than Coberger. They're using an alternate perpetrator legal defense. They plan to. Legal briefs about this were submitted under seal. The prosecution objected to this. All of this was done under seal and in closed door hearings. So we don't know what the judge said about this yesterday. Did he issue a ruling saying he's going to allow this alternate perpetrator defense in, or did he say no, or did he? We don't know. We don't know what he said. Hippler will also written an order. We're expected that Judge Hippler will issue a written order on that eventually as well. He previously questioned in court whether the defense had met a legal threshold for admissibility of the alternate suspect theory rather than just allegations. Left unaddressed during the public hearing Wednesday was any discussion from Hippler on whether he will appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the presumed gag order violations. Remember, this came about after Dateline aired that show. There was a hearing. The judge suggested that a special prosecutor should be looked into because of the leaks. They said that there was a leak in the case. All this stuff ended up on Dateline, and a gag order is in place on the case. These guys can't talk about it. They're not supposed to talk about it with anybody. The judge, the prosecution, the defense, they want to find out who this leaker is, how Dateline got the information, and we will see if he does appoint a special prosecutor. Last month, Judge Hippler did encourage the defense to submit a formal request to investigate, and a public log of case filing showed sealed briefs that seemed to suggest that the request has been made and that the prosecution then responded. So we will see how Judge Hippler rules on all of those issues, but we'll see if this goes to trial. It's been interesting to talk to people about this case, many of whom say Coberger is guilty 100%, he did it. And many people have told me they don't think he did it. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Bryan Kohberger did it? Is he wrongfully accused or is he not? And we will, of course, right now, he is innocent. He is presumed innocent until he is officially convicted, if he is, after the trial, which is expected to last up to 3 months starting in August. Karen Reed, I'm sure you saw the news. I won't spend much time talking about that. I really haven't followed that one, I'll be honest, and I know many of you have. And I know it's created a lot of thoughts since the not guilty verdict came down yesterday. It was a little wild to see all of the people outside of the courthouse cheering. And when I say wild, not because of the verdict, but just because she had so many supporters that were out there that really wanted to be stand by her. They had to escort her out of the courthouse to her car. And I read this morning that they're going to come out with a movie and probably a television series about this. So not guilty verdict in that case. And we'll see what happens with that. Now on to my interview with DJ Barney. So this is the guy that owns, it was called Self Storage Plus. It's now called We Are Self Storage in Rexburg. And he dealt with Lori Vallow. Remember that one of the key pieces of evidence in the Brandon Boudreaux trial that just ended was the tire that was wheeled in and out of the storage unit there in Rexburg, along with the car seat from the Jeep that was taken in and out. The jury was shown that. We showed it to you 5 years ago when DJ called me up and said, hey, I have some footage. Do you want it? And I said, absolutely, and went down. DJ did not want to go on camera at the time. He didn't want to have any involvement in it at the time, but now he's ready to talk. Sat down with him and one of his colleagues, Carly, who still deals with the public, asking about this case. We sat down in one of their buildings there at the storage unit facility, and here's how that interview went. We are here today at We Are Self Storage in Rexburg, formerly known as Self Storage Plus. DJ Barney, Carly Hobbs. DJ owns the place. We have Cato and Bandit, the two dogs that have been seen around the world now. So these guys, DJ owns the storage facility here, and he is the one who had the key piece of evidence in the last Lori Vallow Daybell trial, the video of Alex and Lori visiting with the tires and the car seats. And now you're breaking your silence, we could say, DJ.
At least publicly.
Publicly, right. Why don't we go back to 2019 October. Do you remember when Lori came in here?
Yes.
You do? What do you remember?
At the time, my office manager, Sandy, was working here, and Sandy has an infatuation with Hawaii. Always has. It's her favorite place in the world. So when Lori came in and she had a Hawaiian driver's license, that sparked a conversation, just like any common connection or anything. And they talked about Hawaii. They talked about Hawaii and islands and, stuff for a minute that just made it a little more personal, which we do with a lot of our customers, And so I remember that. And as the other caveat, as far as me remembering it, I was just the guy that was going very high maintenance. To me, that's what's said in my mind, with,
you could tell
I
Lori
was just
seemed
like,
high maintenance.
yeah, it's like, I don't want to pay that monthly bill. You know what I mean? Just kind of a, I've never, but that's what stuck in my mind, just,
Right.
just weird thing, whether that, that's what stuck in my mind, but it was the Hawaii driver's license that sparked it, that turned it into a 15-minute interaction rather than a 5-minute interaction.
She was very talkative then.
Yes.
Very willing to
nice.
talk.
And, they talked about, islands and, which island they'd been on and there and, stuff like that, which I was kind of just doing my own thing. But
So she signed the contract, Lori Ryan,
yes. And,
not Vallow.
and to us, it was always Lori. That was the only thing it was. And that I do remember that she used her sister as an alternate contact.
Okay.
Because
Summer.
we collect alternate contacts, kind of a thing. And but we didn't know who that was or any time. We just punch it in the computer. Just a daily task.
So this is
And,
October. When did you realize the woman on the news rented a storage unit from me. When did you put that together?
Probably, I had watched I'd started to see a little bit of the footage, like the poster,
Of the
type,
missing kids. And then did you see the poster of Lori and Chad?
I may or may not have.
But that didn't
I
click.
didn't. No, it didn't click. It didn't click until after I had been served a search warrant. Because in the search warrant, that's an interesting story as it is, but I'm trying to read it and speed. What is this? Because they're still your customers, so you sometimes it's like, well, what are they in trouble for? May determine on how much information I want to give.
So when the police come to you with a search warrant for one of your units, you were a little nervous.
I was outside. It was after hours or close to after hours, and we were just finishing up on the day because we were still under construction, and had guys working, and I was just kind of cleaning up, just checking to see at the end of the day when everybody pulled in, and I was told, that we have a search warrant, and at first I was like a little defensive because, I thought it was for me, and I didn't, maybe I always feel a little guilty about something, I don't know, but
Right.
It was, to me, I was a little defensive as far as, okay, what's going on, and it was funny because I knew all the officers involved. I dealt with them because, I used to run a towing business, so we interacted quite a bit, and so like Chuck Considus, I remember him when he was a patrolman. Mm-hmm. I used to fix his seats because he was so big he would bust the car seats in all the cop cars, and all the other cops would just like, don't let Chuck drive my car, because he'd break the seat. Right. But so I knew these people, and once they kind of seen that I was defensive, they were like, no, this is for a unit, not
Right.
you, kind of a thing. And then, I read it and I was a little like, okay, well, I don't want you breaking into my unit. I'll cut the lock off. And then what are we going to do as far as putting a lock on?
So the customer supplies their own lock.
Yeah, we sell a lock to you when you rent the unit.
So Lori would have had the key to the lock.
Lori would have had all the keys to the lock when she left here. Whatever she did with them is,
Right. So, but
point.
you, in order to get that open for the cops, you had to go cut
We
it.
cut it off, and I told the cops I wanted to do it because
You wanted to
have to
preserve
be
the unit, yeah.
you don't want to destroy, you don't want to scratch up your building and stuff. And they were all fine. They actually reimbursed me for that. They bought a new lock, at the end of the day, and they took those keys with them.
Did you happen to see the items in the unit at that time?
I unlocked it and I opened it up and I looked at it and it looked like a lot of other, boxes and stuff. I remember seeing, the bikes and boxes and stuff, but there was nothing nefarious looking, but sure. I didn't want to, it wasn't my place. So I'm like, here you go and let me know when you're done.
This was November of 2019, so it hadn't hit the news yet. And you kind of knew before everybody else in a way, because we didn't find out about this till December.
Yeah, and it was after the search warrant that when I started, because in the search warrant, you got JV and, everything was
TR,
initials.
Tylee,
Right. So I didn't put it together until I talked to my brother, and he says, well, send me a copy of the search warrant, because my brother's an attorney. And then as the news started coming, and then I realized, oh, this is that, so then you just was waiting to see how it unfolded, because I didn't have any inside info, it's just, we have the unit here. And the police told me that, hey, we got everything, and I told them, they obviously says, hey, if anybody shows up, watch this unit,
Right.
type of a thing, and nothing ever happened. And it wasn't until later that when the credit card quit going through, and because at the time of the search warrant, they were a paying customer. Their card was on auto pay, and I think it paid for one more month,
And then
if I remember right, and then it started coming back declined, and we'd reached out to there. It's like, okay, well, as long as we're getting paid, we don't care. But what do we do with the unit? Kind of a thing. And at one time, I was nervous about the search warrant because it had the unit number on it. And as the case developed, I was a little nervous. Once it wasn't getting paid for, we could have either auctioned the unit, which I did not want to do because that would have created more, there. And I talked to them, and I asked them if I could move it. And they says yes. And that's when I moved it from a 10 by 10 unit to a smaller 5 by 5 unit, because I didn't want that unit number, through the search warrant coming out and then people going
to that unit.
So we left it unlocked. So, I just felt better that, hey, this stuff is protected
In another unit.
in another unit that nobody knew about other than me. And I told the law enforcement what unit it was going to be in.
Right.
But I had, I walked out there, just moved it, wrote it down in a seat, kind of like this one, made it in the computer where it was like nobody could ever figure it out.
Did
But,
you all try to get a hold of Lori to say your card's being declined?
We did, and we had no contact. I think her sister answered once,
All right.
if I remember, but I wasn't making those phone calls.
All right.
It was just, day-to-day business, hey, call the people and see. But at the time, we were waiting to see what was going to happen. But once that card got turned off for some reason or maxed out, it just died.
So you start to follow the story. It's February. I think I'd only been home from Hawaii 2 or 3 days when you reached out to us.
Yes, because I'd watched that footage, and that really kind of got me. It's like, because our cameras were brand new.
You had just gotten security cameras installed.
Yeah, if you went back from the first date that we seen Lori in the unit, and you go back like a week and a half, 2 weeks, our footage was the sky. Because, they install the camera and then they come back and adjust them all because they were that new.
So had Lori had they done this 2 or 3 weeks earlier, there would have been no footage.
There would have been no footage.
Wow.
And interesting, especially the footage that was played in court, you see dogs running around.
Yeah, the dogs are here.
You see my kid that's driving the four-wheeler.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, one of the interesting things is I'm walking through the parking lot as Lori's leaving. That happens all the day. You don't think that, hey, I have a serial killer here.
Right.
I have, there's the most nefarious thing going on.
Right.
You just go on with your daily business because you have a list of things that needs to be done.
Right. I remember coming, you reached out, I said, I'll be there in the morning. We came up, and you had this list that Carly's holding that you had gone through.
Yes.
So what is this list? I still have a picture of it on my phone.
It's very illegible,
But it makes sense.
So once I talked to you, because I was trying to, at first, I always had the video on 10-1, because that's easy. You look at the lease, you see what time, you go to the camera at that time. That was easy footage to find. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing there, so we didn't know. With the amount of stuff that was in the unit, we thought, well, maybe she put it all in once and never come back to the unit. We don't have anything, at the time, we didn't have anything that logs customers in or out. But after I talked to you, I'd started doing some searching and seeing some things, because I'd called our camera people and they'd come up and show me how to do a line detection search where I can draw a line on the screen and then the computer will search for everything that crossed that line over a period of time. And and once I knew that there was a little more interest, you were I'll be there in the morning, and you could tell by the sound of your voice, you were like, hey, this is
Right.
This is like the guy that caught Watergate or something. I don't know.
I know, that was a big scoop.
But to me, it gave me the little bit of ambition to take the rest of my day and all through the night going through these searches and finding, and like, there they are. And all I did was do the start and the finish, because this list isn't very inclusive. There was a lot more work than that. But it's like, this is when they entered the property and when they left. And we didn't still have all the videos that, going from camera to camera. I was just looking for when they, when I seen them in the unit, and then back up to see when they entered the property and then when they left the property. And that's what this list was. And then later on, we went through and had to follow every little camera because everything is a segment.
Right.
And
this is so helpful, though. So October 1, Lori's by herself in her car. She's here for about 9 minutes. October 2, she comes with a man in a car here for like 4 minutes. So DJ went through and listed all of the visits, including one visit on the day of Tammy Daybell's funeral from a man who was Alex, most likely. And then 2 men back on the 28th of October, when they dropped off the bike. 2 men meaning Alex and Chad.
And that was an interesting one because that's the first time I realized that these guys were, I wasn't going over this video. I was just writing it down. That when there was 2 guys, I was like, oh, so these aren't the same guys.
The same guy coming
That's
with
why
him.
everything says male, because I wasn't like, short, fat guy, tall, skinny guy,
Right.
I wasn't looking for that. And when I seen the 2 males, that's the first time it's like, okay, now I have 3 people. Because I just wasn't analyzing.
Sure. The last time they came, Lori with Chad, the 24th of November for about 4 minutes in the afternoon, and then 3 days later the cops come.
Yep.
And then they search it with the search warrant. So this was a critical piece of information. So Carly, let me bring you into the conversation. You've been here 4 years now, and what do you have people coming here saying? Is this the storage unit that Lori Vallow had?
I think we're still known around Rexburg to be that storage unit.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people that know that it's us, and I mean, people still talk about her quite a bit. So.
Yeah. What do the customers ask about?
They do ask like what was in the unit and stuff like that, but they more so how was she, or did she see, like, did you kind of think she was a little off or anything like that, really? You
mentioned the stuff in the unit. What happened with that stuff, DJ?
Okay, originally I had moved it, and then and law enforcement at the time had basically released it to us, like, you do your thing, and I'm like, I'm just going to put everything on hold because I'm not going to sell it.
But normally, if someone abandoned their property, you legally can sell it.
We
after
could have
a
listed
certain
in
amount
the
of days.
paper, and and we could auction it off,
Yeah.
which we hate to do for anybody.
Right.
I mean, auctioning is our, we try to, we'll Facebook stalk you and track you down before we sell your stuff.
Yeah.
But we moved it, and then we'd been in contact with you and everything, and I was kind of worried, like, I want an inventory and everything. So I think the next time that we'd done anything was with you, and when Dateline was here.
Yeah.
And I told Dateline, I says, you guys are inventorying this with us, kind of a thing, because now I have there won't be any, I wanted to protect us as a bit, make sure we have everything is listed for an inventory thing.
Right, and we got it all on video.
Yeah,
the stuff.
right.
Yeah.
And then they give me a copy because it was, two-sided. You guys are doing your story, and then I'm like, hey, I didn't go through this stuff myself. It was interesting when I did move it. It was all me alone in that hallway, and the kids, when I did that, the kids were not found. Kind of a thing. So he is hoping, they were at a ranch somewhere, or, something like that. But I still, looking back, it was kind of a dark, you just had that sixth sense or whatever that this is not right,
Yeah. I remember it felt eerie.
Yes, and that's the correct word. Now, remind you, I have a kid that is just a few months younger than JJ, who went to Kennedy. Now, I've asked him, did you ever meet him? And JJ wasn't there very long, and no.
Right.
But if JJ would have continued to go there, they very well could have been friends.
Right.
So when you have a child that's the same age as a child missing, that hits.
It does.
It hits a little harder, and when you're moving, the grandparents' scooter that they give JJ, and when you're moving that, and you realize your kid's favorite thing in the world is his Strider, and if you left it somewhere, you had to turn the car around and go get it.
Right.
Kind of a thing, and you realize this is just in a storage unit.
And Larry came out later and said JJ loved that scooter.
Exactly, and that's
Love
where I
that
was,
scooter. Yeah.
that's where I put the two with Cooper, is like, kid's upset that he doesn't have his scooter, kind of a thing. But it was just an eerie feeling moving that stuff.
Well, especially because it's the stuff you would take if your house was burning down. All the photo albums, the baby books,
Yes.
the blankets with all the
Personalized
photos. You want to save
blankets,
those
yeah.
things, yeah. So after we put up the story, what was the reaction like on your end?
I think you warned me. It's like, everybody's going to be calling you, and I'm like, whatever, kind of a thing. But we had law enforcement here because obviously they wanted to get the footage and everything, and I'm trying to talk to them, and my office manager got the phone, and then she's just like, because she hated the case. She did not want, it was just too, she's a mother of 5 kids.
Yeah.
It's just, this is tearing her apart.
Right.
And she actually brings me the phone because she doesn't want to answer it anymore. Because at first it started out, the first people that called us was the Standard Journal.
Right.
And then just seconds after that, it was Post Register.
The local media.
And then within like 5 minutes or so, it was Salt Lake and Boise. And within a half an hour, I had CNN and Fox. And, it was like, holy cow. And you couldn't get anything done other than answer the phone.
Right.
And that because, I was still answering the phone and trying to carry on conversations. And it was just like, holy cow, I had no idea how fast something could blow up. And it was really an eye-opener as far as, how fast the word gets around, when something goes off. And I was just thinking, Nate, you warned me, but you could have warned me.
Not only that, your name got out there.
It did.
And you have a different name now.
We do.
So tell me about that. What happened?
Well, it was all great. I tried to, we put the business in there, and I think I asked you to do a hyperlink, because we were brand new
Link to your-
business, and we were
yeah.
struggling trying to get, going. And during this whole case, I can't remember the exact timeline, but all of a sudden we get a certified letter in the mail, and it's a cease and desist order with the threat of a lawsuit in federal court about a trademark infringement on our name.
Oh.
And that started a very costly, process, yes. And that in which we ended up having to hire, my brother's an attorney, and I call him and he's like, man, 2 things that are weird that nobody talks about, and that's maritime law and trademark law. You either do it or you don't, because any attorney, and he's like, I'm not, but I'll find one. And he found us a trademark attorney out of Salt Lake, and retainers and expenses, and, we're like putting retainers on credit cards because it was just not a good time for us because we were in the middle of construction and would put
And you're brand new.
everything in, and our business wasn't that old, but we're still trying to expand, and we didn't see this coming. Usually when I'm in trouble, I'm like, I can see it coming, but this was just smack right in the face. And it's been a long time, and it cost us, I think it was around about $25,000 when we were all done with.
Oh, man.
And what they never come out and said, oh, this is because you're on the news, but our SEO, which you know all about, I mean, that's the goal, went through the roof, because we went from having, 50 clicks a month on our website to thousands and thousands. And I still think to this date, somebody was sitting in their office looking at their stuff and wondering, why is this guy ahead of us when we weren't even that close? And then
This is another company in another state, right?
same state,
Okay.
but they have places in several several
localities.
states, a lot bigger than us.
Yeah.
Interesting, our trademark says, well, we do a background check first, so give me $600 and we'll find out who we're fighting. And when it came back and it's like, oh, you've got way more money than we do. I've never wanted to been back down from a fight, but I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get my butt kicked. So we went back and forth and negotiated. It never did end up in court, but we knew we had to do there, and we came with our new name.
How'd you come up with it?
Lots of
Do you remember
hours.
Carly? Yeah, you guys kind of brainstormed?
He took days to figure it out.
We had lists of names, and do you like this? And it was funny because I have a small heater, and I can't remember what it said, but it's something, it was like, we are heat, and it plays off the R, just like Toys R Us, please don't sue. Well, yeah, they're bankrupt, so I don't have to worry about that.
Well, you could say the R means Rexburg.
Rexburg,
Yeah.
or it just, it's just good. But we come up with it. Obviously, it looks better in a logo.
Yeah.
And we've liked the change, but it would have been nice to do it on our own doing.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, it happened. But I still contribute that to this case because I don't think we would have ever been.
No one would have ever known.
Would have ever been big enough, and it would just been under the radar. And we never did it nefarious. I learned a lot about trademark law, stuff and service marks and stuff that was like,
Right.
and I'm not really happy I learned all that,
Well,
but
they have knowledge.
Yeah.
What did you think the day the kids were found? Do you remember that day?
I was sad. That you just had a lump in your heart, and you just was like, you just lost hope. You know what I mean? It was over. And that's what really, when I started to disconnect from the case, because, it was just that sad.
Right.
It was, and our footage never really played a huge part. I mean, I got subpoenaed for Boise, for the trial in Boise, and everything would get stipulated. I signed tons of affidavits, worked with law enforcement any way we could, but I never felt like we had the big piece of the pie. We just had stuff that looked weird. But locally, for our customers, we got a lot of feedback, because I have people that I know that are in Chad and Tammy's ward, and there were still people that were defending Chad. And I think when the hand smack, on her behind, people have told me that made a difference. That's when they quit like, oh, this is blown out of proportion. That's when they're like, yeah, that's
Right. It was
that
caught on the
changed
camera.
a lot of people's, just like, okay, something's not right.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was like, we have weird stuff, it's weird things going on, that don't make sense. Not all our customers do this, but it never got put together until, never played a huge part until this last trial.
Yeah, I wondered if you were going to show up in Arizona to testify.
I think that I had signed affidavits for there. We'd had phone calls. Most everything I did was through the Rexburg Police Department.
Yeah.
And I think by this time, the Rexburg Police Department had this sealed down and was working with everybody.
Yeah.
And the fact that she was talking about Hawaii, my only interaction, we didn't, it was our video cameras that were playing the part, because we never had an interaction with anybody that was, business or anything, from the day she signed her lease.
You said you kind of disconnected from the case. Did you end up following the trials at all?
Well, I was under, once I got subpoenaed,
you couldn't.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so I was really trying to keep that, but it was really hard when people kept calling me and say, hey, your storage units are on the news and everything, because as a business owner, and this is something that has changed me, and I still follow, East Idaho News is where I go for my news, kind of a thing. I don't always read the CNN articles, but,
We hear that a lot.
But when people are calling you, you always worry about your business. It's like, hey, we don't want to be the bad guy. We don't want to think we did something wrong. We don't want, any of that. And so I disconnected, and I didn't want to be the witness that gets up there, and if they ask you things and you ruin something, So I really did try, and it just, when I was scheduled to go for the trial in Boise, I was actually in Vegas, because I told them, I says, I'm going to a trade show for the storage units, and I won't be back till this day. But I was packing bags on a Sunday when Ron Ball and the prosecutor called and asked me a few more questions, and then said, hey, you don't have to, we got this stipulated, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, and I was happy.
Wow.
I was happy, kind of a thing. So,
Well, it's
yeah.
a good thing that you had your cameras going. It's a good thing that you had those key pivotal moments.
Oh, and we have learned about cameras, because at the time I think we had 16 or 17. I now have 92.
Wow.
And not only that, I am currently running 145 terabytes of video and audio storage. We have a camera that will read your license plate number.
Wow.
So to me, I have realized, have we caught any serial killers since? No. But,
Hopefully you never do again.
I can find out who moved that mattress, who left the mattress, who,
And you have audio, you have mics.
on some, yes. And in key places. And we use our cameras, and she can attest to that. We're always like, I need you to check the cameras. Whether it's who left a box of junk, or who did this, or, who maybe hit our building. Yeah. And we see some interesting things,
I bet.
on our cameras and that. But plus we monitor them. When I'm in my apartment, I've got two 86-inch TVs. One of them is always on the cameras. The other one can be cameras, but if I'm watching Netflix, I'm watching
Got it.
86 cameras. You know, I'm old. When I get up in the morning at 3 o'clock to walk to the other side of the apartment, you know, my cameras are still on, and you just
You're
look
watching them.
and see, you know.
There's something about surveillance cameras. I don't know what it is. It just
Yeah.
make it fascinating to watch.
But at the same point, we have people that ask us about there, but we also have people that know we have very good cameras. And that helps our bit and lets them know that it's there. But if you're a crook, if you're doing something, you know, you don't want to be here.
Right. Well, if
You
I'm
know?
going to store property, I want them in a place that's secure
Yeah.
and has that stuff. Well, thanks for calling me with that scoop 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was interesting.
5.5 years
Never
ago.
thought it would have done to this. And now
Right.
we're just opening our third facility. We're continuing to grow.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, we're still just a family-run business, and we try to have those personal ties to our customers. And Lori and Chad will always be kind of a, but at the same time, I'm glad they stored here, because we wouldn't have had this, you know, good chance this wouldn't have, you know,
Right.
I know,
It's a good thing you were a vigilant business owner, too, though.
because we wouldn't have had this, good chance this wouldn't have, you know,
Right.
I know.
It's a good thing you were a vigilant business owner, too, though.
Well-
Keeping track of it.
You know, I don't, we just try.
Yeah.
And it likes to know that we have, something from our efforts actually helped. You know, Kay had a very interesting slogan and a t-shirt she was wearing. And we feel that same sentiment here. You know, we just, the last day of the trial.
Yeah.
And we share that same sentiment as Kay does. And we wish the families and everybody, you know, that it's there. But I also, when I'm watching the news and see another business that has something happen that had nothing to do with them, it's interesting now. I kind of like, oh man, those guys that's a rough day at the office, because they've had this thrown on their plate.
Didn't ask for it, it just came.
You know, kind of a thing. But I hope there's a special place in hell reserved for certain people.
Yeah. I don't know if we got around to answering where the stuff ended up.
Oh,
You said you
they-
moved it.
Okay, then the law enforcement came back, and they served another search warrant,
And
which
seized
we
it
knew
all.
about it.
Yeah.
Because they asked me, and I says, well, I talked to my brother, and I says, you guys need to because they're like, do you want to just give it to us? And I'm like, well, we want it all to be a trail, so they served us with another search warrant, and then they took everything. And then we were sure, speaking with law enforcement and that, I says, when this is done, you guys are the caretaker, disseminate, send it.
To the loved
And
ones.
I don't even know who got what or how that worked, but I'm like, once, and they may still have it because of appeal, I don't know.
Yeah.
But our thing was give it to the family, send it to whoever thinks, whoever's, this means something to.
Yeah, good.
Kind of a thing. And because, you always said, hey, do you want to there? Anybody was here, I was like, don't mention my name. I don't want, I'll
Yeah.
kick you off the property if you take a picture of me. I don't want to be, we just want to be in the back. But
Right. Carly, is there anything you want to add?
It still lives. That's it, really. The little comments about them and what happened to everything, and
Right.
we still get comments that kind of throw you off for a
About
second
it.
because it's.
Right.
And now our dogs vet all our customers.
Yes, well, your dogs were famous thanks to the trial.
Yep.
Anything you want to add, BJ?
No, it was just kind of interesting when I watched the footage from the trial, and when I watched the live comments, and then when they all shipped to Cato, I was like, oh my gosh, still the spotlight.
Anytime you have a dog on screen.
Kind of a thing. But there were some comments, or these dogs are living their happiest lives. They are, they don't know what a leash is.
They're very friendly. They were very friendly 5 years ago when I came, and they're still
Yeah,
here. I'm glad they're healthy. Can we go check out the unit? Okay, so this was the building where Lori rented the unit.
Yes.
It was one of these bigger garages?
Yes, it was a 10 by 10 size unit that she originally rented, which was our biggest in our hallway.
And we saw Lori and Chad and Alex coming and going out the
Yes,
door.
outside this door is the only place they ever entered.
And when the police came, you helped cut off the lock.
Yes, we cut off the lock. There, maybe if I scratched, I don't. Sometimes I scratch it, but I must have been good. Sometimes I scratch the unit, you know, when I have to cut off a lock. But
And then they just closed it up and left everything in
Yep.
here. And then when we came, you had moved it to a smaller
yes, I
spot.
moved it to a 5x5, which is our smallest unit.
Yeah.
You know, kind of a thing. And at first we thought, you know, they never finished moving in, you know, because why would you have that big of a unit for that small of stuff? But then it was same thing, all the stuff that was going on, you know, and then I think their plans changed at the last minute and they wanted to get out of town.
It still feels a little creepy to be here. I don't know why. But you know that they were walking in and out of that door.
Well, we have people say, this isn't the hallway, this isn't the unit, right, you know, kind of a thing. And we have to affirm them that there was nothing ever,
Right.
you know, nobody was ever in here, you know, but we still have the people, you know, and we did have one person that when stuff came out on the news or something, you know, we actually had to move them from one building to another because
They requested
they
it.
just, I have to.
Yeah.
You know, kind of a thing. But everybody deals with stuff on their own way.
Yeah.
We're kind of past that now. I've got, how many hallways do we have? I don't know. 18 of these hallways. And they all, without the numbers, you know,
Yeah.
they all look alike, you know, kind of a thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, it's just one of those things that happened and I'm glad that it's no longer a mystery.
Yeah. Thank you, DJ.
Hey, thanks,
Thank
man.
you, Carly. Yeah, I can tell you, it really was eerie being in there. Just knowing that that's where Lori and Alex and Chad had been, and all of those belongings. I'll never forget that day going down there. And then I went back a few weeks later with Keith Morrison from Dateline, and we looked in the storage unit, and they used that in their program. So big thanks to DJ for the tip, for the big scoop, for showing us around, and for talking with us all these years later. Here's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube, East Idaho News. Sure appreciate you following along. Over the coming weeks, we will continue to do Courtroom Insiders on Thursday nights. Might take a week or two off based on vacations and stuff like that. Working on some programming that I can't tell you about yet, but man, it has been eye-opening, and I'm hoping to have that out here in the next 2 or 3 weeks involving undercover work. Going undercover and getting videos, and it's been pretty wild. And then, of course, at the end of July, we will pick things up nightly with the Coberger trial as we report live on the trial, on the Bryan Kohberger trial from Boise, where it's happening, and bring you all of the latest details. Really appreciate you all watching. Thanks for your support, for your kindness, and I hope you have a really great weekend. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider.